Right now, can't I? Okay, we won't do that. The Greeks started doing it over 2,500 years ago and have been doing it ever since. Australians have to do it once every 4 years or they get fined. Some countries, they cut off your hand if you do it. And yesterday, less than 50% of people in St. John's did it. Yes, I'm talking about that pleasurable task, voting. So think about it. 50% of people voted. Do the math. 50% didn't. 50% of eligible voters didn't have time over 2 weeks to fill in a ballot, put it in the mailbox for free, no postage necessary, anything like that. And it seems that year after year, society itself seems to be becoming more cynical, more apathetic about our system of government. And we seem to be becoming, generally anyway, more disengaged in the whole process. And maybe it's because we've never had to fight for the rights, to, for the freedoms, and that we just take them for granted. And I think that's the key word, taking it for granted. We think that everything we enjoy today is a right, but some people think that they have no responsibility to make sure that those rights are passed on to the next generation. But with all rights come responsibilities. And a very easy responsibility is the right and the duty to vote. When I was growing up, there were two things that we had to do in my house. One was go to church. That didn't stick. The other one was that when you became of age, you had to vote. Didn't matter who you voted for, because my family, we weren't politically motivated, no party affiliations or anything like that. Didn't matter who you voted for, as long as you voted. And of course, my mother was always the one to say, well, if you disagreed with who you voted for, well, my vote cancel out yours anyway, right? So that was kind of a little thing in our family. But it was rightly said, and I'm sure everyone here has heard this before, that if you don't vote, you don't have the right to complain, which is true. So like I said, we didn't have any political affiliations. We didn't campaign for anyone. We didn't make calls on anyone's behalf like that. We were all, I guess, equally as cynical about the political system as anyone is today, but we earned the right to be cynical by voting. But casting a ballot shouldn't be a big ordeal, and that's what I find surprising. More and more people aren't engaged to vote, especially if you consider what goes on TV today, what pop culture has brought us. It's all about voting. You vote people off islands. You vote people out of Big Brother's house, right? You turn on TV, on CTV, and you got your Canadian Idol there. People will actually pay to vote. They actually have to dial their 900 number or whatever, and they actually pay to vote, and then it's told, vote early, vote often. Vote as many times as you want, and they still will do it, right? Which, I don't get that, but anyway, that's fine. You would think that they should be engaged enough then to vote in the political process. So, but they're not interested enough anyway to vote in a free election. Maybe they think, I'm not sure, maybe they think that the politicians aren't entertaining enough, but of course, turn on CPAC, turn on city council meetings, at least when Andy Wells was around, and I'll tell you, it was a ride a minute, listening to, what they'd be getting on with. Enough so that I'd say they should probably have created an Oscar for them, but, I'm only joking about that. When you go back to our own provincial history, and it's kind of ironic that I would say this, but we actually voted ourselves to not have the right to vote. Back in 1934, when we voted for a commission of government, for the government to come in and take away our right to vote. So we even voted back then not to vote, which is kind of strange for what I'm saying now, but still, it was a whole process to do that. So I opened the speech by saying that some people have had their, hands cut off because they voted. Others have died for the right to vote, and it's, we've all heard, the horrendous stories that you hear from all over the world about that. People have fled their countries to come here so they can live without fear, and I think most of them would shake their heads in disbelief when they think that so few people here in this country vote, when you consider that, I think nationally it's under 60% the last time. It's been going down for years and years and years, and it's just, less than 60% have voted in the last election. The Australians, I think, probably have the right idea by legislating that voting is mandatory. If you don't vote in Australia, you get fined. $20 fine. If you don't, I think if you don't show up, then if it's a second offense or something like that, it's a $50 fine, and then you have to pay court costs. So there's kind of an incentive to vote in that, you know, you pay otherwise. So the biggest complaint that I always hear about why people don't vote is they say because politicians are all the same, nothing changes. So the next time, I guess, you could always ask someone, well, if you don't vote, then I guess things should change then. I don't think so. Another argument is people always talk about that their vote is wasted. But in fact, there is no such thing as a wasted vote anymore in this country, because the party in power doesn't mean it has to, or it doesn't have to be the party in power to have influence. Consider Tommy Douglas, who is considered the father of Medicare. He was never in power. He was the leader of the CCF, which I guess was the precursor to the NDP. They brought in, you know, a valuable thing for all of society here, and without being in power. And also, when you look at parties like the Green Party, who 10 years ago perhaps were considered a fringe party, the more votes that they get in any given election, even if they don't win, even if they don't gain a seat, they get money for research, which then will sort of add to the whole political conversation. So I'm a really big believer in, I don't care what kind of view you have, I don't care how wacky it is, you know, you vote, you take part in the whole process. Otherwise, you're going to have just the black and white issues, you know, the both sides coming out all the time, and nothing will ever be resolved in the respect that we all live in the gray area, but you only hear the polarized sides of any debate. So all I can say is vote. It's your responsibility. Use it or lose it. Thank you.